My wife cheated on me with her ex. I confronted her in front of her family and handed her divorce papers. I never thought I would experience something like this myself. I usually heard about it from others or saw it online, but facing it in real life can really change everything. I work as a professor at a university. I have been married to my wife, Lilac, for a decade. We have 2 kids. I met her at a party where my aunt told my mom that I should ask Lilac out. I wasn't into dating at all, so I never dated since I was focused on my PhD and education. After seeing Lilac, I was struck by her beauty. She looked as soft as a flower, just like her name suggests. My parents kept pushing me to get married, so I decided to ask Lilac out. Our parents had met at the party and really wanted us to get married. The first date went really well. She was enjoyable to be with, and she was studying dental at that time. We dated for a year and then got married. It has been a decade now. Our everyday lives were quite ordinary. She was an amazing mother and wife. After she came into my life, everything felt fine. She looked after me well, but that was just the beginning. I had no idea that my curiosity would lead to an unexpected twist a decade later. Understanding her past could have helped me untangle the issues I never bothered to explore. Everything was fine, and I had never questioned her in our 10 years of marriage until a month ago. On an ordinary day, things suddenly got very difficult for us both. I might have been making assumptions, or maybe she was keeping something from me. I never thought negatively of her before. One evening, she returned from her clinic at an odd hour. I called her, but she didn't pick up. I initially assumed she was busy with many patients, so I decided to call the receptionist at her clinic. She mentioned that Lilac skipped the clinic that day, which left me feeling curious and on edge. I felt really anxious, worrying about what could have happened. I couldn't sleep at all. It was past midnight when she came in, looking really tired. I planned to ask her why she was absent today. She walked by me without a word and said she had a lot of patients today and just wanted to sleep. After she lied to me, I sat on the couch, anxious and wondering why she would do that. It was a strange feeling for me. I felt irritated and annoyed, but I chose to try to sleep since it was late and I had work in the morning. I entered the room and noticed her in her office attire, legs dangling off the bed. I held her close and positioned her gently. What could be worse than discovering that your wife, who hasn't touched alcohol in 10 years of marriage, smelled strongly of it? I placed a blanket over her and gazed at her face. She slept soundly, undisturbed. I decided to leave for work early in the morning to skip any conversations. I couldn't sleep because it kept running through my mind. I needed to prepare question papers for my student's upcoming exam. I figured waking her up in the morning would just cause stress and arguments for both of us. I returned from work and noticed her car in the parking lot. While petting my cat on the front porch, I noticed a Lilac through the window. She was on her phone, smiling and blushing. When I walked in, she set her phone down right away and began assisting our older son James with his homework. She usually hugged me and kissed me, but this time her smile disappeared when she looked at me. She said hello in a way that felt flat and uninviting. It was really uncomfortable to deal with something so strange all in one day. Later in the evening, I asked her for a warm cup of coffee. She held a cup of coffee in one hand and was texting with the other, smiling. I glanced at her briefly and then turned my gaze elsewhere. My second glance prevented our younger son Max from getting burned by the coffee that could have spilled on his head while his mother was distracted texting someone, who knows who. I yelled at Lilac for the first time in our 10 years of marriage because of her carelessness. She kept saying sorry, so I told her I wanted to discuss a few things. I allowed the kids to play video games for a bit so we could talk properly. I didn't ask where she was last night, since that might give her a clue. Instead, I asked where her attention was and who she was talking to on the phone. She glanced at me with an apologetic expression, and just as she was about to speak, her phone began to buzz. It occurred 3 times, and it really frustrated me. She did say sorry. She said she ran into an old friend 2 days ago, and last night they chose to catch up, which is why she was late. She still hasn't mentioned that she wasn't at her clinic or anything about the alcohol issue. Whether you agree or not, keeping information hidden is a form of minor cheating. It's almost midnight, and she's still online, chatting on her phone. It's bothering me. Update. It's been a month since the last update, as I mentioned earlier. I was focused on preparing questions for my student's exam and got so caught up in my schedule that I didn't manage to provide an update. That night, it wasn't strange to see her talking to someone at 4 a.m. However, the conversation I overheard changed everything. I want to share this. Nah, it wasn't a dream marriage of mine. He's boring and outdated, and I'm tired of the vanilla sex every time. God, I need spice in my life. Oh, you want to? That was probably the response to her desire for more excitement in her marriage. Was I truly an old-fashioned, dull person? Did I actually fail as a husband? I believed she was content with me. Did a new friend change everything? Who is this new friend of hers? She would sleep in my arms, occasionally bring me flowers, and treat me kindly. I can't believe I heard all of that. I returned to my side of the bed. I heard footsteps, and the door opened. She returned, crawled under the blanket, wrapped her arms around me, and quickly fell asleep. My instinct was strong, and I could feel in my gut that she was pulling away. After that night, I became suspicious of her and began to follow her. Things took a turn for the worse, and it was more than I anticipated. If someone can cheat a little, they probably have something bigger planned. I was wide awake, and my head hurt a lot. After breakfast, I mentioned that I could take her to the clinic. At first, she didn't reply. Then she mentioned that she was going to meet James's teacher at the parents' meeting. It was funny. She doesn't realize the meeting was yesterday, and I was there. I noted all the lies she told me. I stayed silent and went to work. I received a call from her clinic while heading to the office. The receptionist wanted to know why Lilac hadn't shown up at the clinic for 3 to 4 days. She wasn't really replying to the calls and texts. The patients had scheduled appointments, and when the doctor failed to show up, they felt frustrated since they were expecting to be seen on those days. One thing led to another, and my doubts became clearer each day. I chose to experience it for myself instead of letting others control me. I finished my work quickly and let my intern handle the rest. I left my office and headed to her clinic, aware that she wouldn't be there. I walked into the clinic and called her name. She missed my call, but returned it after 2 minutes. I mentioned that I went to see her, but she wasn't around. She paused for a few seconds before replying, a bit unsure. She mentioned that she was visiting an old patient who couldn't make it to the office and needed to explain the RCT process. She was not telling the truth because when I asked the receptionist about any home visit appointments, she said there were none. I returned home, and my 2 sons were quietly focused on their studies. We have a nanny who looks after James and Max. She was a longtime friend of my mother and the most reliable person. I made dinner for them and wrapped up the paperwork to request a few days off to be with my wife. I kept quiet and waited to collect all the evidence I needed to support my concerns. At dinner, I asked James about the meeting. He looked confused and asked which meeting I meant since we had already gone to the parents' meeting. Lilac's expression was rewarding. She bit into her food and mentioned that she wanted to speak with James's teacher about how he was doing. I set my spoon down and glanced at her. She wanted to know what was bothering me. I sighed and asked if she had seen the progress report I sent her over the phone. She said sorry and mentioned that she had forgotten. I asked her how she could forget something so important while talking on the phone all day. She asked, clearly annoyed, if I was implying that she spends all day on the phone and does nothing else. I said no, but she misunderstood it. She got up, clearly upset by what I said, and yelled at me. She accused me of being unreasonable and claimed that I was the one who never made an effort for the family. Her statement made me angry, but instead of saying everything I felt, I let her talk. I asked her what she meant by that, and she repeated that I was boring and that our marriage had lost its spark. I chuckled and thanked her for turning the conversation around to protect her own thoughts and feelings, then went back to eating my food. I walked away. She was on a call, laughing and talking. I didn't care about the conversation. I just wanted to see it for myself and gather proof. I never looked at her phone, and with how she acted, I figured she had a password. I waited until she was asleep and then took her phone. She had the password. I attempted several methods, but it still wouldn't open. One thing about her forgetful nature was that she wrote passwords in her notebook. I opened the notebook, and there it was. The phone finally opened, and my hands shook as I looked at the text messages. I had two, and there it was, the truth. I sat on the floor with my phone, scrolling through messages filled with sexts, nudes, and I love you, sent to a guy named Richard. I cried that night. I can't recall the last time I cried like this. I covered my mouth to hold back tears and took a deep breath. Time was running out, and I needed evidence. I quickly took screenshots of their messages and saved them to my phone. Before I set the phone down, I needed to delete the screenshots from the gallery. Luckily, I checked and found pictures of them there. I transferred the pictures to my phone and deleted all traces that could indicate I had looked at her phone. In the morning, I left for work like I always do, but I actually went to Elijah's place. We have known each other since we were kids, and he was aware of everything in my life. I shared everything that went down, and he was just as shocked. He kept saying that if I hadn't shown him the proof, he would have hit me for a joke like this. I drove to Richard's address from one of the texts and parked my car behind a tree. It wasn't my car, it belonged to Elijah, and Lilac would realize that in no time. I watched as Richard stood outside his house holding flowers. Lilac got out of her car and hugged him tightly. I snapped the picture and couldn't bear to look at it for more than a few seconds. I kept thinking that if she didn't like me, being honest would have been better and could have solved everything. But she didn't want to lose her family and couldn't stop cheating. Even though I was heartbroken, she shattered my ego. In a world full of cheaters, I took pride in us being a stable and loyal couple. She joked about how calm I am. This lasted for 3 to 4 days, and I gathered enough evidence because I was ready to add fuel to the fire and completely destroy the already broken marriage. I told our nanny everything, and she said she would inform me when my wife returned and left the house. The nanny called to say she needed to visit her sick relatives, so she wouldn't be coming today. I granted her leave. I called Lilac and told her the same thing. I asked her to go back home since James and Max would be left alone. She said yes right away. I was with Elijah, talking about what we should do regarding this issue. I lacked the bravery to share this with our parents. Out of nowhere, I received a call from Lilac. She was crying and told me that Max had fallen off the ladder and broken his arms. She was on her way to the ER with him. My skin felt cold and anxiety gripped me. I panicked, unsure of what to do next. I wasn't in the right frame of mind to drive, so I asked Elijah to take the wheel. When we got to the hospital, Dr. C reassured us that it was just a minor injury and would heal in a few weeks. I sighed in relief and kissed my son's forehead while Lilac spoke to my mother on the phone. I sat next to James and asked him about the incident and how it happened. He said Max was climbing the ladder and kept shouting for Mom, but she didn't hear him because she was on the phone. Then Max slipped and fell. I was really upset after hearing that. I approached her and tossed her phone to the ground. All eyes were on us. I yelled at her for being so careless. Elijah was trying to help me relax, but I couldn't. Max might have been hurt badly. I expressed a lot, and she attempted to portray herself as the victim by claiming I was an absent father. After hearing this, I leaned in and whispered in her ear that at least I was better than her and didn't mess around behind her back. She appeared terrified, much like a frightened cat. After the argument in the hospital, Elijah took our sons to his place, and I returned home with Lilac. We stayed silent on the way back, and about feeling sorry? She was only acting, since I caught her texting him a few times, which made me even angrier. What she said shocked me. She probably thought I would feel sorry for her, but I have no sympathy for cheaters. She mentioned that she had dated Richard during high school and that their relationship ended just a month before we got married. She didn't want to marry me, but felt she had to. Lilac's dad is a dentist with his own clinic. She wanted to inherit it, but he had a rule. She had to marry someone respectable first. If not, it would go to her younger brother, who also wanted to be a dentist. Richard was unemployed and inexperienced at that time, so she ended things with Richard and chose to marry me. She mentioned meeting Richard a month ago at her clinic when he came in for a teeth cleaning before a photo shoot as he models for a fashion design company. After seeing him again, things progressed gradually, leading to this. I was in tears and she was crying too, begging for another chance to make things right. but it felt like a performance. She knew Richard wouldn't marry her, and she couldn't risk losing her stable family. She said I wasn't her type and that she often felt trapped. I asked her if she was blaming me for my personality being different, which led her to cheat instead of taking responsibility for her own actions. She got up and yelled at me for not being understanding, saying that's why she liked Richard more than me. I approached her, took her hands firmly, and told her to stop with the nonsense and manipulation. I explained to her that cheating was her decision and that she chose to do it, not because of me. I felt a lot of anger towards her claims, and I took every action I could. I left and asked Elijah to take James and Max to their grandparents. I'll be staying at his place for a bit. I haven't talked to him since I got to his place. I really don't feel like talking to anyone. Sharing my feelings with others could help me feel better. I can think clearly now. Update 2. Hello everyone. I realize it's been some time since my last update. I appreciate you reaching out. This is the final update that meets expectations. Max is all healed now. I was working on my latest project, which is really just about satisfying my ego. I stayed at Elijah's for 3 days to focus on my college work. I wouldn't discuss any of this with him, and I steered clear of any related conversations. When I got home, I was surprised to see it decorated with flowers and balloons. Lilac showed up with flowers, apologizing and asking for my forgiveness. She kept texting and calling me, but I didn't want to talk to her. I felt nothing for her, but hatred, yet I decided to let her manipulate me one last time for my revenge. It became obvious to me that she was always putting on a show. To be honest, she hardly ever looked after the kids. That was the nanny's job. Being a mother is a responsibility, not a favor to your child. The kids preferred me or the nanny over their own mother. I was focused on getting ready for Max's birthday and dealing with other issues caused by Lilac, like couples therapy and various efforts to fix this relationship. She put in a lot of effort to seem real while meeting Richard behind my back every week. We invited close family for his birthday, including my parents and siblings, and hers too. Before everything happened, birthdays used to be enjoyable for her, but now it feels awful to realize she was just pretending the whole time. After the cake-cutting ceremony, it was time to show her father the biggest gift. I asked James, and Max went to the other room to open their presents. While everyone was relaxing, I called Lilac and asked if she was going to give the gift she made for her father. Her father seemed pleased, and everyone else was too, but Lilac already had it. She kept shaking her head and signaling no. She had tears in her eyes when I gave the gift to her dad. He opened it and looked at the pictures and everything inside. He got up and yelled at her for seeing that jobless JRK again and for messing up our marriage. Another gift was for Lilac, divorce papers, which arrived 10 days ago. My family and her brother were stunned when I revealed everything to her father. Her father told her to sign the paper, leave the hospital the next day, and find a job elsewhere, as he couldn't allow her to tarnish his reputation. Lilac cried and begged her father for forgiveness, while her mother felt heartbroken. She messed this up for everyone, and a little bit of regret would help me end it, but she kept seeing him afterward. I let her see James and Max on weekends, but I wouldn't let her take them for a stay after what she did. After the divorce, we went our separate ways and didn't talk to her, even after a long time of seeing her around. James and Max missed her, but it's better to be raised by a single parent than by one who is irresponsible. I'm moving forward with my life, staying occupied with work and kids. The past clings to me like a parasite, but getting my revenge did boost my ego. Watching her not get what she wanted helped me improve my mental health, and I moved on with my life.